Shalom, first and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rukal Kadosh, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who have teached this truth. And shout out to Yakim that's out there in the four quarters of the earth going into them cities and proclaiming this truth. As you know, I've done a few lessons over there, and what did I tell everyone? I told everyone that you could best believe that these closed stores, especially the newer ones, such as Kmart and Sears, would become FEMA centers. And I've been looking at the location of Sears as well, and that's all barricaded off. You can only access that from the other side of it, so that's all fenced off. Why is that being fenced off? Well, take a look at this Kmart location here, and that's fenced off, so that's where I want to start with this. This, being the year of prophecy, I prophesied that, which many others already know, that they're going to use old closed stores for FEMA centers. So, sure enough, this is what's happening to the local Kmart as I play this report from local news.
Good evening, Allison. The old Kmart on Hilltop will soon be the new location for car fire survivors to go to for assistance. Starting tomorrow at 9, the local assistance center will be called the Disaster Recovery Center, run by FEMA. Residents will be able to get information about disaster assistance programs and speak with representatives from the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Small Business Administration, and local agencies. The Disaster Relief Center will be open from 9 to 7 daily and is located at 2685 Hilltop Drive at the old Kmart. Reporting in Reading, I'm Brianna Haney, KRCR, News Channel 7.
So you know as well as I do that Esau will use this to his abilities, you know, and like everything else, though, I know that's not a FEMA camp, but just the fact that that became a FEMA center is close enough. Fire tornadoes are now starting to become a regular when dealing with wildfires, because the Most High is getting ready to destroy Babylon the Great, because it is that city that's covered with the blood of the saints. And, well, you already know that the saints are Israelites, and we coming back to our power, now we can call upon our power to bring fire down from the heavens in the sight of men. And so these fires are getting much harder, because the Most High is against this place. He despises America. That's why we despise America. So that's going on there. In the meantime, they're making their moves on Iran. They want regime change in Iran. So here's another video. Washington is continuing to say that regime change in Iran is not the goal. Yeah, right. Yeah, like it wasn't the goal in Syria either, but that's what the rhetoric has always been. Do you believe that? That the protests are simply an organic uprising? We'll see what some of the Trump administration themselves have to say about that.
We should provide material, financial support to the opposition if they desire it. We should work with intelligence services from other countries, Saudi, Israel, to provide more pressure. There's a lot we can do, and we should do it. Our goal should be regime change in Iran. The declared policy of the United States of America should be the overthrow of the mullah's regime in Tehran. The behavior and the objectives of the regime are not going to change, and therefore the only solution is to change the regime itself. And that's why before 2019, we here will celebrate in Tehran. Thank you very much.
The MEK is a significant movement in Iran, and not just the MEK, but other similar kinds of organizations opposed to the regime. Now, there is no organization as comprehensive as the MEK, or with the both internal and foreign, and where we would constitute the foreign support,
we would concentrate the foreign support.
You've been able to form resistance units all over Iran. Those protests are not happening accidentally. Those protests are happening because they're being coordinated now. They're being coordinated by many of our people in Albania and many of our people here and all throughout the world.
Many of our people in Albania and many of our people here and all throughout the world.
And I want to tell you, the changes in Washington are very exciting. You saw on this stage, standing here, of course in Paris, but this reminds me of Paris, you saw John Bolton. You remember John Bolton. He's going to be President Trump's national security advisor. You think he changed his mind? No, in fact, if anything, John Bolton has become more determined that there needs to be regime change in Iran, that the nuclear agreement needs to be burned, and that you need to be in charge of that country. The right policy for Iran, for every good, decent government in the world, is regime change. Regime change.
So that's what the game plan has always been, just like they've tried to do with Syria. But you know this is going to backfire on Esau, as it did with Syria. And then eventually this leads to a nuclear war. And we can't wait for this nuclear war to come. As we keep on pushing these prophecies, and Esau keeps moving, as the Most High is moving the Edomites and all these wicked nations to the valley of Yehoshaphat. So the Most High is getting ready to destroy these wicked countries, as they cannot leave Syria and Iran alone. Here's more from Press TV.
Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has dismissed the U.S. offer for talks, saying Tehran does not want futile negotiations with a country that has lost the world's trust. Zarif says there's no consensus in the U.S. government about talks with Iran. He argues that the U.S. President Donald Trump offers unconditional talks with Iran, but a few hours later, his Secretary of State sorts a long list of demands for negotiations. The top diplomat said this shows that the U.S. foreign policy is in chaos. Zarif noted that only a few countries support Washington's hostile policies towards Iran following Trump's withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal. He says such lukewarm support indicates that Washington is in isolation in its anti-Iran stance.
And there's more, of course, because Donald Trump is doing what he does best. The Zionists tell him what to do, which, of course, I'm talking about them Rothschilds, Amalekites.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned countries against doing business with Iran. Trump tweeted that anyone doing business with the Islamic Republic will not be doing business with Washington. He described the latest sanctions as the most biting embargoes ever imposed. He added that the restrictions will be ratcheted up in November. The U.S. president made the comments hours after reimposing the first round of sanctions on Iran, which were lifted following the 2015 nuclear deal. Russia has expressed deep disappointment over the move. Moscow says it will do anything necessary to save the historic accord. The European Union has also criticized the snapback of the sanctions. Jason Onruhe is a political commentator who joins us from Ontario. You have what Donald Trump has said, one of the most severe sanctions ever to be imposed on Iran, this particular round. Do you think that he believes that by doing this that Iran will come to the negotiating table?
I think that he certainly thinks so. I don't see that there's really much other reason to carry out these kind of sanctions unless it's just to attempt to destabilize Iran in general, to try to force a regime change type scenario. But these sanctions are not likely to directly cause something like that to happen. I think that there's a very good chance that the U.S. is trying to make Iran come to the negotiating table, which has already been there the entire time, which was already open and had already been settled with the previous JCPOA agreement. It's not necessary to do this at all whatsoever. It's only happening because the U.S. wants to change the terms of the agreement, possibly to curb the Iran missile program, to possibly make other changes that would be beneficial to the U.S. But it seems like in this case that the U.S. is just aggravating many of its neighbors. The European Union has begun to enact the blocking statute, which would protect many European businesses who would continue to do business inside of Iran, to try to protect them from any damage that the U.S. might want to do to them. And many European businesses have already pulled out of fear of what the U.S. could possibly do to them. The blocking statute still needs to be enacted. It still needs to be updated to deal with the nuclear sanctions, which could take some time. So I think that overall this is going to have a negative effect on Iran, and the sanctions always do. If they didn't, then nobody would use them. But I think it is frankly fairly clear that the U.S. is trying to force a renegotiation of an agreement that was perfectly fine to begin with by placing these sanctions on Iran.
What if these sanctions don't work? What will happen next?
I think that these sanctions might escalate to an even greater degree, as the U.S. has already threatened to cut Iranian oil off of the market, which would have an absolutely devastating effect to the country, and questionable how Iran could economically survive such an act. But I think that since there has always been an attempt in one form or another towards regime change inside the country, I think that we could possibly be looking at more U.S. interference inside the country, possibly through the use of the MEK and other such organizations. But I think that for now the U.S. is going to try to see if sanctions can possibly force out of Iran what they want, and that they could possibly escalate to something in the future. I mean, the U.S. has demonstrated that they're willing to go into outright mass murder to get what they want. They were willing to kill 1.5 million people in Afghanistan. They were really willing to kill 1.5 million inside of Iraq, all of it for, frankly, for imperialist plunder. But Iran is a very different creature from both Afghanistan and Iraq. They have far more capacity to defend themselves. They have a lot more political power than the previously two mentioned countries. But I think that there would definitely be some kind of escalation, possibly something more physical than just sanctions, if Iran did decide to rebuke the Washington's attempts to rewrite an agreement that was already agreed to.
Thank you very much for that. Jason and Ruhed.
And I'm just going to say this for the record. The United States did support an 8-year war with Iran using Iraq to do it. That's why they put in Saddam Hussein, their puppet at the time, and had ousted the previous leader in Iraq because Iran had a revolution, an Islamic revolution is what that's called, in 1979 when they overthrew the puppet government that was there, you know, which the United States, again, made that coup d'etat back in the 50s, but Iran had overthrown in 1979. So what the United States did is they supported an 8-year war against Iran using Iraq to do so. And because Saddam Hussein had failed to do the job, which is why Desert Storm and everything else, they set Saddam up, and even Alex Jones will tell you that. No wonder why he's off the air, right? Because he told you the truth that they set Saddam up with the whole Kuwait thing. You know, like the media lied about the incubators, and you know, we were fed that propaganda. You know, but none of it was true. But pretty much an 8-year war was started with Iran using Iraq to do so, and the United States was supplying Saddam with them weapons, which they later said were weapons of mass destruction. But the United States was the ones giving it to him. So anyhow, the next part of this will deal more with Syria. Until then, I say shalom and barakatah. This being the year of prophecy, we're going to see a lot more.